The Little Mermaid. A long time ago, mere people existed. They lived in the sea, and they were half fish, half human. They were human down to their middle, and then they were fish. They had long, beautiful tails, and they swam through the water using their tails. One mermaid was called Ariel. She was the daughter of the king. She spent most of her time swimming to ships that had sunk to the bottom of the sea. These ships held treasures from the world above, and the little mermaid would fill her arms and set up her collection while singing. The little mermaid's voice was the most melodious one under the sea. The oysters opened, and the fishes circled around to hear her. She had 5 sisters. The little mermaid was the youngest. When they became 16, they could swim up to the top of the sea and look at the human world. Ariel was the youngest, so each year one of her sisters went up and saw the human world. She wanted to see it so much, but she had to wait. The first sister swam up and saw a city. She said the sounds and lights were magical. The second sister swam up and watched the sunset. She said the colors were unbelievable. The third sister swam up a river and saw a castle. She saw children playing in the water. And a strange black animal called a dog. The fourth sister was shy and stayed in the sea, but she saw many impressive ships and jumping dolphins. The fifth sister had her birthday in winter, so when she swam up she saw large pieces of ice in the sea. She sat on one piece of ice and watched a storm. The ships ran away from it, and it was beautiful. However, Ariel's sisters became less interested in the human world. They swam up less and stayed in the sea. But one day every year they swam up together and sang songs to ships. The men in the ships fell in love with them, and some even jumped into the sea and died in the cold water. Afterwards they laughed about this together. Ariel watched her sisters leave and felt very sad. Of course, Ariel's parents did not like their daughters singing to human men. "You are very bad. to kill men like that. You are just like the sea witch, Olga." At last the day came when the little mermaid turned 15. Now she could swim over the surface and see for herself. And the sailors were dancing on the deck. People were laughing and having a good time. Now and then, as the waves lifted her up, she could see even better. Suddenly, a handsome young man stepped out on the deck, and 100 rockets rose in the air as the party was for him. The little mermaid swam closer. The men on the deck all seemed to like that young man. When the young man spoke, the sailors would laugh and patted him on his back. But when his crown fell down, the men picked it up a crown.
"He must be a prince. Today is his birthday,"
thought the little mermaid. Suddenly it was very dark, and the wind picked up. The sailors started to run here and there and pulled the sail down. The ship slipped and swooped, rolled side to side, and up and down on the huge waves. Then lightning, thunder, and a strong rainstorm hit the poor ship. It was very dark, and the little mermaid could not see anything. The lightning struck the sky, and she could see the young man on deck, who seemed to be the only one standing there. He was trying his best to keep the ship afloat. He was helping his men with the ropes, but the waves got very rough, and the ship started to tip over. The prince was thrown overboard and fell into the sea. The little mermaid knew that human beings could not live under the water. So she dove deep and reached out and grabbed him by his shirt. Then she swam up to the surface and pulled his head above the water. They kept floating like that as the waves rose and fell. By the next morning, the storm had passed, but the price had been still all night. The little mermaid saw the top of the hill and shouted, "Land!" She swam to the shore and pulled the prince behind.
"Is he dead?"
She thought and started singing a sad song. She found him a cloth. All of a sudden, the young prince started to move.
"Oh, you are all right?"
The little mermaid asked and touched his forehead. Just then, she heard a group of girls coming over. She dove back into the sea and hid behind a big rock. The girls found the prince and called for help, and soon he was led off. The prince would never know that the little mermaid saved his life. When she went back to her home, her siblings wanted to know all about her trip, but the little mermaid was too sad to say anything.
"How can I live in their world?"
said Ariel. And then she had an idea. One night in the sea, the king held a ball. Ariel had been waiting for this. When everyone was dancing, eating, and talking, she left the castle. Nobody was around, so they did not see where she was going. She was going to see the sea witch, Olga. She had heard many stories about Olga, but she was the only person who would help Ariel. ogre's home was a cave. The way there was very dangerous. In the floor of the cave there were many sea snakes. They looked like plants, but they moved slowly and tried to touch her. Ariel swam carefully into the cave so that they did not touch. Inside, Ogre sat on the floor. The snakes were sitting around.
So you are here because you want to be a human, correct?
How did you know?
Said Ariel. Ogre laughed.
Today is a good day for you. I can help you.
Then she mixed something with some of her own blood. She cooked it over the fire and put it into a bottle.
If you want to have legs, all you need to do is to drink this potion.
The sea witch said.
But I don't just give my potion. You understand?
The little mermaid asked.
What is the price of your potion?
Oh, not too much. You must give up your voice for the potion.
The sea witch replied.
My voice,
said the little mermaid. She knew her voice was what everyone loved about her.
Oh, you don't need it,
said the sea witch.
What a waste of time. What if the young prince marries someone else, and the next you must die, and your voice will stay with me forever?
The little mermaid's heart leapt.
Whatever are you going to do? Make up your mind, little child. I don't have all day,
she said. The little mermaid quickly made decision and took the potion. Then her voice came out of her mouth, and Ogre quickly took it. The little mermaid swam up and sat on the beach. She drank the potion. She felt a little dizzy and in pain, like a sword was being passed through her body. She spun, jerked, and then fell down. When she woke up, she was on the same dry land where she had rescued the prince. Lifting up her head, the little mermaid could see that her dream had come true. She had 2 legs like humans.
Girl, are you in trouble?
It was the prince who asked her this. She tried to reply, but no words came out of her mouth.
Can you speak?
He asked. She shook her head in no.
Oh, allow me to take you to the castle. You can clean yourself up there and change clothes.
The little mermaid was very happy and joined the prince to go to the castle. It was a little shaky for her to walk on her 2 legs at first, but soon she learnt and got the hang of it. This day the young prince showed her around the castle. He pointed out a portrait and told her all about them. In the castle they gave Ariel beautiful clothes and delicious food, but it was strange. Because she couldn't talk, they treated her like a child. The prince liked her, but she could not say anything, so their conversations were strange. Still, over the months, they became close. She slept in a room next to the prince. They went horse riding together. They went mountain climbing together. They danced together. These things hurt Ariel's feet very much, but she never showed this to the prince. In the evening she sat on the beach and put her feet in the cold sea water. This made them hurt a bit less. After that day, the prince wished the little mermaid to be by his side every day. He thought of even falling in love with her. but still held high hope of marrying the girl with a lovely voice who rescued him. The king called for his son, the prince, one day and said to him,
"Son, your mother and I have made a decision to marry you, and, luckily, we already picked a bride for you."
What?
The prince panicked, as he only wanted to marry the girl with the beautiful voice that he remembered.
Who is this girl?
The prince asked the king.
"A beautiful princess from a nearby land. She is coming with her parents this night. We will talk about the wedding plan,"
the king replied. The prince was crushed, and the little mermaid felt fear. She knew what would happen to her once the prince married someone else. What the little mermaid did not know was that the evil sea witch had put her voice into this princess. She was a stuck-up princess who thought only about herself. Yet when she spoke, it was the little mermaid's voice that came out. The prince was stunned and asked the princess to sing, and it was the little mermaid's voice that filled the room. The prince could not believe his luck. At last he could marry the woman he had longed for all this time. When he shared his joy with the little mermaid, she tried to show that she was happy for him, but gloom filled her heart. The next morning, the little mermaid went to the sea. Her sisters were worried, since they had not heard from her, and rose above the water to see how she was. The little mermaid told them of the trouble she was in. The prince's wedding was going to take place the next day, and the day after that she must die. The sisters had an idea and asked her not to worry. They told the little mermaid to come back to the seashore later, and dove back into the sea. The little mermaid came back to the shore, and her sisters rose up again, but one of their beautiful long hair was gone. She cut them off to give to the sea witch in exchange for a knife. With the knife, they asked the little mermaid to kill the princess. The little mermaid took the knife, but in her heart she knew she would not kill the princess. Finally, the wedding day arrived, and the little mermaid stepped up to the wedding ship with the other guests. The wedding was supposed to take place at sunset. The three princesses had returned home and were met with their angry father.
"Where is Little Mermaid?"
The Sea King asked them. They told their father about the trouble their youngest sister was in, and he swam up to the wedding ship. The Sea King saw the prince and princess getting ready to get married. He understood that his daughter did not use the knife. The Sea King rushed to see the sea witch, who laughed at him. She said there was only one way to save Little Mermaid from her fate, if he would just hand over his scepter to her. With the scepter in her hand, the sea witch could rule the underworld kingdom. The Sea King took a deep breath and agreed, as he had no other option. The sea witch grabbed the scepter and laughed in glee. She rushed to the wedding ship, and now she had become a huge sea monster. Her tentacles were twisting out from her body like an octopus. The little mermaid knew she must protect the prince and even his new bride. So she took out the knife. Just then, one of the sea witch's tentacles reached out and lifted the little mermaid right off the ship.
"This is the end for you,"
crowed the sea witch, Before the little mermaid knew she was wrapped up in her tentacle. The little mermaid was holding the knife and used it and dove deep into the head of the monster. The sea witch reeled back in pain, and she was freed, and the sea witch shrunk into a small octopus. She ran away in fear. As she fell down, the little mermaid's voice returned. The princess the price was marrying then shouted in a harsh, gruff voice,
"What a lousy kingdom this is! Can't even have a proper wedding."
The prince heard this and knew that she was not who he thought she was. Then the little mermaid started to sing, and the prince knew that the voice he remembered belonged to the very one he had grown to love. When the Sea King arrived, his scepter was floating in the sea waiting for him. With a sweep of the arm, it was his again.
"I see my daughter is in good hands,"
he said. The prince put his arms around the little mermaid.
"Now I know it was you all along the way,"
the prince said.
"Will you marry me?"
the prince asked her. The little mermaid nodded in happiness, and a wedding on the ship took place after all.